Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to day 3 of official Amonkhet previews. And you can see from the title card here, we have a pretty big card to talk about. It's Gideon of the Trials. On top of that, we have a number of other brand new cards to look at. Actually, some good ones today. Not as many as yesterday, but some really strong ones. Quickly, before we get started, I do want to welcome all the folks who are hopefully discovering us on VidMe. We've been approved as a VidMe channel, so now we will also broadcast not only on YouTube, but also on VidMe. So welcome to everybody there. Having said that, let's get into the cards for today, starting with Gideon. Gideon of the Trials, 2 white and 1, Course of Mythic, Planeswalker Gideon, 3 loyalty, +1. Until your next turn, prevent all damage target permanent would deal. 0. Until end of turn, Gideon becomes a 4/4 human soldier creature with indestructible. It's a planeswalker. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to him this turn. And the second 0, yeah, that's right, you heard me right. The second 0, you get an emblem with, as long as you control a Gideon planeswalker, you can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. All right, there's a lot to unpack here, obviously, so let's get started. First off, 0 cost ultimate. That's amazing. We've never seen that before. Pretty cool. 3 casting cost planeswalker that can defend itself with that +1 ability, and on top of it, it can be aggressive if you're already in a commanding position. You can start attacking in with it the next turn. That's actually pretty awesome. And if you're worried about losing the game at any point, especially later on in the game, you can go ahead and use that 0 casting cost ultimate to make your opponent jump through some hoops to beat you at that point. Because not only is this a great Gideon, but there's also another really amazing Gideon in the standard format, and we all know him, we all love him. Gideon Ally of Zendikar has been a staple ever since he's been printed, so that's a card that's not going away just quite yet, and combined with this Gideon, it's a pretty powerful tag team right there. And I don't know what the deck looks like yet. Like, I don't think it's as simple as throwing 8 Gideons into a deck. You're going to have to brew around this a little bit, and I'm sure someone will come up with some really creative stuff. But at least right now, you do have to kind of take into account what number is the right number, what other things you want the deck to do, what is the true win condition of the deck, because you've created a pretty powerful defensive deck at that point. But how are you getting your damage across? I mean, that's all got to be solved. You don't want to be in a situation where you have multiples of the same Gideon stuck in your hand, things like that. So there is a brew that needs to happen here, but I do think the pieces are available, and I think that the power level of this card combined with the power level of Gideon Ally of Zendikar, which I do think is maybe a little better than this one. Ultimately, they're both very, very good, though, and they are going to see standard play. This potentially could see some play in Modern. Again, I'd have to think about what kind of deck would want something like this, or what you could brew in that particular format that'd be fast enough. But this does feel like the power level could potentially be there. It's going to be great in Commander, a lot of different places. So very excited to see this. This is the card that I think, maybe the first card that's really captured me in a strong way for this set. I like a lot of the other stuff I've seen. I like the synergies that I've seen, but this is one of the big cards that I'm glad they've revealed. All right, so we have a whole bunch of other new cards to talk about. So I'm going to move on, and we're going to look at Floodwaters. 2 blue and 4, it's a sorcery. Return up to 2 target creatures to their owner's hand, and has cycling too. Now, cycling is going to boost the casting cost of some of these spells, and I think that's fine, because cycling is a very powerful mechanic if you played with it before. So something like this costing 6 feels maybe a little overcosted, but the fact that I can cycle it away, if I get this in my opening hand, or maybe one of my first draws, and I know it's going to be a while before I'm able to use it, I could attempt to cash this in for something that I could use more immediately. That's going to be very good for you in Limited. You'll be happy to do it. Also, too, it's return up to 2 target creatures. So it's not creatures you control. It's not creatures your opponent controls. It can be either or both, right? So that's kind of cool, because it appears there may be some good enters the battlefield effect creatures, stuff like that. You could bounce a creature. It is sorcery speed, so you can't protect your own creatures, but you're able to return them into your hand, recast them. I think there'll be some benefits to that at times. Also, if you use it just maybe in the more traditional way, you can pull your opponent's shields down, get in there for some extra damage as a surprise. Pretty good card overall for Limited. I think you'll be happy to run a one of these, maybe in a lot of Limited builds. Painful Lessons. A black and 2 sorcery. Target player draws 2 cards and loses 2 life. This one's a common. Here's the thing, though, with this card. It's black card draw, so you're probably going to play it in Limited, and it's going to do what it's intended to do. You take a couple points damage, but you cycle this and draw an additional card on top of it. That's good enough a lot of times. The only thing that's a little painful about this card, if you will, is the fact that we've seen better versions of this in the past. Cards like Sign in Blood, Read the Bones. Now, yes, there have been better versions, but you're kind of stuck with this one, right? So you're going to play it in limited. You'll probably be happy to do so. It's still going to be a fine card for you. It could even see a little bit of standard play potentially. Yes, it's not as good as those cards I mentioned before, but again, if it's your only choice at any given time during its lifetime in standard for a decent, sort of cheap black card draw spell, then it could see play. I mean, we've seen cards like Read the Bones, which arguably is a better card, see play in standard before. This one could get there too. All right, next we have another mythic, and this is a quite good one. Combat Celebrant. It costs a red and 2. It's a human warrior for 1. If this hasn't been exerted this turn, you may exert it as it attacks. When you do, untap all other creatures you control, and after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Okay, so where do I begin with this? I have been saying over the last couple days, they've been giving us a lot of pieces to an amazing red aggro, maybe mono red, maybe Rakdos color, aggro / burn deck. And here's another huge, huge piece to that deck. This could definitely become a standard staple if that deck can rise to prominence, and it feels like the pieces are definitely falling into place for it. This is going to be amazing for you in Limited too, because again, most Limited games usually revolve around creatures smashing into each other, so this is going to be a huge card for you there as well. But even formats like Modern, Commander, I feel like there's a lot of possibilities for this card. It just feels like it is super, super pushed. Another thing to point out with this particular card, which you might not notice at first glance, is during that first combat step, you could exert some of your creatures. The second combat step, this card actually untaps them all. So you could do a double exert with some of your creatures if you wanted to. That's kind of awesome too. There's a lot of depth to this card, and I also want to think about ways to exploit like instant blink effects, stuff like that with this. There's just a lot of opportunities here. This is an amazing card. Glad to see it show up in the previews today, and I'm going to be talking a little more about a red aggro in a few moments. Watchers of the Dead cost 2 artifact creature cat 2/2. You can exile this though, and each opponent chooses 2 cards in his or her graveyard and exiles the rest. This is a pretty interesting card because this really messes with Delirium, and this is the first time we've seen that happen since Shadows over Innistrad. The Delirium decks have been very, very strong throughout their history at this point. And this could be the nail in the coffin, though, for those decks. They ran into some strong opposition eventually in the meta last time around with the Mardu Vehicles decks and the 4-color Saheeli decks really rising to prominence. This could kind of finish off those Delirium strategies all in all. What's cool about this is if there's a Embalm / Aftermath strategy you're playing and your opponent's on a Delirium strategy, this is hurting them a lot worse than it's hurting you because you're able to keep 2 of those cards in your graveyard. Granted, they can keep 2 cards in their graveyard too, and if they keep like an artifact creature or something, they might not be too far off of Delirium, but they do have to do more work to rebuild that again, and by that point it could be too late. So this card is interesting, at least in that regard. Also, too, it's a 2/2 with upside. Those are traditionally good, so I could see this seeing play in standard. Maybe it's out of sideboards, but I think it will get there. It's also going to be a decent card in certain strategies for you, or maybe in standard you just need a 2-drop. That's the case sometimes. I need a 2/2 for 2. This is just as good as any, and I'm going to run it anyway, so it's definitely going to be good for you there. As far as Modern goes, I mean, you have cards like Relic of Progenitus, so I don't know if this is necessary in that format in particular, but for the most part, it definitely has a great role in the aforementioned formats. Alright, you probably recognize these 2 cards. They've already been spoiled. We've already talked about them in a previous video. But the reason I brought them up to refresh your memory today is due to the fact that we saw the other parts of their cycles. So we got to see the other 4 cartouches and the other 4 trials today. And we're going to take a look at them, starting with the cartouches. So in addition to Solidarity that you see here, we have Cartouche of Knowledge, Ambition, Zeal, and Strength. So much like the white counterpart, these are all enchantment auras. They're going to buff the creature in a small way, but they're also going to give you another bonus on top of it. The blue one costs a blue and 1. It's going to cycle itself, let you draw a card, and the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. The black one, a black and 2. enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has lifelink, and you get to put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. So that could be your opponent's creature, or it could be one of yours, because we saw recently, as of yesterday, that there's some cards where you could get a bonus from having a -1/-1 counter on your own creature. So that could come into play not only in limited, but standard. And if you think of other formats like Commander, for example, that works really well with the Undying mechanic. The Zeal, the red one, it costs 1 red, and this is another super aggressive red card. We've seen a lot of these over the last few days, but the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 in haste, and also, maybe more importantly, when this enters the battlefield, target creature can't block this turn. And then finally, the green one, 1 green and 2. When this enters the battlefield, you may have enchanted creature fight target creature and opponent controls, and the creature you're enchanting gets +1/+1 and has trample. Now, granted, it might not be able to attack right away that turn if it's already fought. Depends on the board state. But still, it's a removal spell for 3 for green. That's actually pretty good, right? I really like these because, first off, they're enchantment auras. They give you a nice little buff. I like the blue one, giving evasion. I like the fact that you could do some interesting things with the black one on occasion. The red one feels really pushed considering the other cards that we've seen in red already. I feel like they're trying to give us the pieces to a mono red deck, and there's another good mono red card coming up in just a second. And the removal for green is going to be good for green just in general anyway, and it also buffs the creature and gives trample. But what I like the most is the fact that these are enchantment auras that are really competitively costed. And even if you get 2 for 1, you're still getting something out of it. You're getting that extra bonus effect, but maybe more importantly, you're getting the way they interact with the trials. So let's look at these new trials. So in addition to the blue one we've already seen, we have Trial of Solidarity, Ambition, Zeal, and Strength. And much like the blue one, they all have the clause, when a cartouche enters the battlefield under your control, return the particular trial to its owner's hand. Which means if you have multiples out and you play 1 cartouche, guess what? You get to return all of these to your hand. That's pretty interesting to think about, right? Maybe that's a way to help make the blue god we saw yesterday a little more viable, possibly. Could be something to think about. So let's look at these individually. We'll start with the white one. A white and 2 enchantment, of course, as these all will be. And this extra ability is creatures you control get +2/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. So this is going to be good in a go wide deck. This one probably will be more applicable to limited more than anything, but it's going to be good in that particular archetype. Next, we have Trial of Ambition, and this is a strong one. It's a black and 1, and this one's an edict effect. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent sacrifices a creature. Great way to deal with a early drop, especially if you're in a more slow, methodical deck and you're up against an aggro deck. And the fact that you might be able to replay this later seems pretty good. Even if standard decks aren't in the market to bounce this back to their hands, this will still see standard play. Edict effects are good enough, even if it's out of sideboards at times. This will definitely be around in standard. Next, we have the red one. Red and 2. This one's going to deal 3 damage to target creature or player. Now, on the surface, you might say, well, I don't know, like Lightning Strike only costs 2. But the fact that you have the option to potentially bring this back and recur it does make me feel a little bit better about paying the extra generic mana to do so. I'm cool with it. You don't get a lot of opportunities in today's Magic to do 3 damage to target creature or player. So I'm going to take it for 3. This is another super strong, perhaps mono red, burn/aggro card. The pieces are really, really falling in place for that deck the more cards we see. And again, of course, this will see standard play. It's definitely good enough. Great for you in limited. Finally, the Trial of Strength, a green and 2. This is going to give you a 4/2 green beast creature token. Again, this one's probably a little more for limited, but a lot of times this will trade up, so it's a very fine limited card. I have no issue with it. Really interesting cycle. Both cycles, actually, the way they interact with each other, I think is extremely, extremely exciting to play in limited. And these are uncommon. The previous cycle, of course, all being commons. You'll be able to hopefully get a hold of a couple different trials in your deck. If you can pick these up on color, they could be relatively high draft picks for you. And the cartouches might be a little easier to come by considering they aren't common when you're in a draft. So leaves open some interesting gameplay possibilities, definitely. Not only in limited, but perhaps even in standard. Having said that, those are the cards for today. So pretty exciting stuff today. Less cards than yesterday, but I'm a little more pumped about today's crop. I'm really excited about the 2 cycles we saw. Gideon looks pretty amazing. I'm really excited to see that card too. So some good stuff today. Finally, before I go, just a quick reminder. Again, thank you to everyone who's joining us for the first time on VidMe. If you are looking for ways to help support the channel and keep us doing what we're doing, you know that's always appreciated. And I'll be honest with you, YouTube has become very difficult this week because of a lot of the ad revenue has gone down due to the fact that YouTube's lost a lot of advertisers, which I won't go into here. I'm sure if you follow YouTube, you probably already know about all that, but it's been difficult. So thank you to everyone who supported us on Patreon. That's really gone a long way and helped out. And if you're inclined to do so, check out the description below. You can see a link to our Patreon page, and we're actually really close to our next goal. So I hope to hit that sooner than later. Secondly, there's another way to support us you can find down there, and that's through the Amazon affiliate store. So if you're thinking of picking up any Magic the Gathering related products, maybe an Amonkhet booster box or bundle, which you can pre-order, you can go through any of the links that I've compiled for Magic products, or you can really buy anything once you go through those links. A small percentage will come back to help support the channel. It really helps us out a lot. So thank you all. I appreciate everything. Until tomorrow, we're going to see more cards then. Have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.